My mind is set, my grind is set, my heart on ice is cold. I'm only here to even a score. Whoa. My mind is set, my grind is set, my heart on ice is cold. We down right now, but did it before. Whoa. See from here we going up. Made the call, I shown up. Now the game is sewn up. Say my name is blown up. We up, 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 we up. See from here we going up. Made the call, I shown up. Now the game is sewn up. Say my name is blown up. We up, 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 we up.
What up, Night Nation, and welcome back to the Knighted Ones podcast, episode number 96. As a reminder, we are the only podcast that features a former UCF national champion, a former UCF radio host, an ESPN analyst and hoops player, an infamous, yes, that's infamous rapper, our resident influencer and IG star shooting the breeze, talking UCF sports. All right, remember to like and follow us on YouTube, IG, X, Instagram, and check out the 70-plus teams and conferences on the College Huddle and the Big 12 Huddle, which we participate in. This week, we continue our march to the season, and we review the defensive line and tight ends. We also have a little bit of QB news to talk about. Who knows where that merry-go-round ends up, but we've got some more insights to talk about. In addition to that, we'll ask Alan, our expert, what his overall grade is for both groups. Antoine Jackson is standing out. We've got a few moves in the administration as far as UCF's side. We'll check in with the Knights in the NFL and the MLB. And we'll talk a little bit about UCF soccer and get Alan's Oxymoronic stat of the week. All right. As we begin today, I'm lonesome except for Alan Levin. Welcome back to the show.
Hey, looks like it's just you and me tonight.
It is. We're holding it down. We're holding it down. All right. Let's get that patented hair flip, please.
Ooh.
All right. As a reminder, folks, when we hit 1,000 followers, he will be snipping that hair. And then for me, I guess I have long enough hair. I can do a hair flip now, too, because I don't have any product in it. All right. So this week, I'm excited to talk about a little bit of football. We're less than a month away from the football season. And we've got a lot to talk about. We've got a scrimmage coming up this week on Thursday. It'll be the first scrimmage. Monday, the team was off. Tuesday, Wednesday, they'll practice. Thursday, they'll have a scrimmage. And that's where we'll really get to know a little bit more about our QB situation. That's the one in the biggest flux. I think our wide receivers are locked down, as our DBs. However, QB is definitely up in the air. So we'll talk about that a little later. But now let's go ahead and start with the defensive line. So Alan, why don't you talk to us a little bit about the defensive line and what we should expect?
Yeah, I think for people that follow UCF football fairly closely, everyone knows defensive line is clearly the best position group on defense and potentially the whole team, which is something we'll get into. It by far, we know that UCF was absolutely decimated by the transfer portal and graduation last year. As Frost has talked about multiple times, there's 60 plus new players on the team. So, but when it comes to the defensive line,
it's more than 60 plus. It's 69 players, just shy of
nearly. I should have said nearly 70 then.
Yeah.
But defensive line by far is the most, in terms of quantity, the most amount of returning players. It's not even a question. There was very little attrition there, which we'll talk about. And it's a really, really exciting defensive front. Our edge rushers, our tackles, all coming back. We got some, obviously returning talent. And then we also landed some exciting transfers as well. So if we break this up into the edge rushers and the tackles, starting with the edge guys, we have 4 returning from last year as well as 2 incoming transfers. And honestly, didn't really lose any defensive ends at all from last year's team that were, that made a huge impact. So obviously we know it starts with Nigel Kelly. He's been already named, I think, 3 preseason award lists, widely kind of anticipated as our best player. I think he's our number 1 ranked player in NCAA football game, like an 88 or whatever. So anyways, he's been getting on a lot of preseason award lists, and for good reason. He led the team in tackles for loss and sacks last year. Comes back and should have a monster year. He,
And remember,
should be.
he was a transfer from Miami, and I believe he was a 5-star as well. So last season was him getting his feet underneath him, so to speak, right? And get within the program and really starting to. Last year was the first year he was actually able to, get in a rhythm and get on the field for us. The thing I'm looking for him, and I'll let you continue. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. The thing I'd love for you to talk about too, and something that I'm looking for him this year is being better about rushing from the edge and maintaining contain, right? So one of the things he did very, very well was he got into the backfield, but he did bite on some fakes that left open some runs last year specifically, or let a QB get out of the pocket. And, being smarter about maintaining that edge contain while at the same time getting after it, I think is going to be a huge thing and a huge growth potential for him. He's a junior this year, if I recall correctly, right?
He's a senior, actually.
Oh, senior. Okay.
Yeah. So his junior year was last year. Obviously, like you mentioned, he missed a lot of time in his sophomore year at Miami. So, like you said, he was getting his feet back under him last year, but obviously had a monster year. He was named Big 12 honorable mention last year, one of 3 players for UCF that was named to any sort of Big 12 team. So clearly an impact player. And he really came along, I think, later on in the year. He had 2 sacks against Utah in that final game of the season. But yeah, he's widely expected to be, our best edge rusher. And he should be flanked by Malachi Lawrence, who, if everyone recalls, there was a lot of excitement heading into last year about Malachi Lawrence. He had a breakout sophomore season where he started 13 games. He had 10.5 tackles for loss and, had a few sacks as well and looked great, kind of broke out there. Then last year he seemed to have regressed, who knows what exactly was, missed a couple games with injury, but his numbers essentially dropped in half. He still finished with 5 sacks, which was, second most in the team after Kelly. But he did not look like the same player from the year before. But he talked about, he had a couple interviews recently, talked about he's healthy now. He's worked on some of the things that he felt plagued him last year. Obviously, there's some continuity with one of the defensive line coaches from last year. And he feels a comfort level with Nigella Kelly and a lot of these edge rushers that were on the team last year. So there's some good continuity there. I think Lawrence is a candidate for, a bounce back player of the year. So that's really exciting. And then in terms of, behind them, you have guys like Jamal Johnson and Isaiah Nixon, who've been on the team now for about 3 years. They're part of Gus Malzahn's initial class, guys that have really kind of played in a backup role, but we did see, Isaiah Nixon start to come along at, probably about the midway point of last year. So those are guys that are going to be, rotation guys for us. So I'm really excited about the edge rusher. I think there's depth there. All the returning talent is back. So I don't think we have a lot to worry about at defensive end. I think you have the depth and you have the returning pieces and the continuity. And I think a lot of us are excited about Kelly, and I don't see any reason why Lawrence can't bounce back. And then before I get into defensive tackles, I wanted to kind of hear your thoughts on the edge rushers.
Well, and I may have missed this, so forgive me if I'm repeating myself, but did you say anything about Sincere Edwards yet?
No, I didn't. I was going to get into him next. So, I'll say that and then you can kind of give your piece. So obviously, I was going to get into the transfers last, but Sincere Edwards, huge pickup. We talk about adding already to Kelly and Lawrence. Sincere Edwards was one of 3 freshmen on Pitt's team last year that played in every single one of their games. So he was a special freshman. Obviously, he's from Wekiva High. He's a local talent coming back home after a year at Pitt, but he had a great freshman year. This was not an issue of playing time or anything like that. He was top 4 or 5 in most of their defensive categories: sacks, tackles for loss, hurries, all that type of stuff. So he played. He wasn't a starter, but he was a heavily rotated in edge rusher for the Panthers last year. So I'm really excited about him. We obviously at one time had he was, I think, the first commitment of the 24 class. and then obviously decommitted and ultimately went to Pitt. But 1 year later, he returns, local talent, 4-star guy. I mean, he was on everyone's radar, had a ton of buzz coming out of high school, had an offer from multiple SEC, Big 10, Big 12 schools. So really exciting to get him back. I mean, when you put him with, Malachi Lawrence and Angelic Kelly, I mean, that's a formidable trio right there.
Yeah, the big thing for me with all of that too is, you mentioned Nixon, you mentioned Lawrence, you mentioned Kelly, you mentioned Edwards. All of those guys give you a solid 4-person rotation. And I think that's going to be more important this year than it has been in years past. If this offense starts to gel and we're running quickly, or if it doesn't start to gel quickly and we need to get back out on the field, having 4 solid edge rushers is going to give us an opportunity to continue to pressure during the game. And we know that the defensive coordinator likes to bring pressure. So if he's going to bring pressure, we've got 4 solid edges. Most of them are 6'4", Nigel Kelly 6'5". Sincere's a little bit smaller at 6'3", but still 240 pounds. So he's got good body mass on him. And as you said, he was a very highly recruited player out locally, and that was a big coup for Gus Malzahn. So I think the big thing,
right?
No, it was Gus Malzahn initially.
Oh, you're saying like when he first transferred?
No, when he first committed to us in 2024.
Yeah, when he first transferred to us. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I thought you had a Freudian slip there for a second.
No, I didn't. No Freudian slip. So the point is with all of this is, one, we have solid returning talent. Malachi Lawrence did have a lot of buzz, and actually was someone we were expecting to kind of have a breakout, but was hobbled by injuries. Isaiah Nixon is a redshirt sophomore. He was a freshman last year. I expect him to get, he was a big time recruit, and I expect him to get some run. And more importantly, Sincere Edwards is just a dog. He was a dog in camps. He played really, really well for Pitt. He's built solidly, but he's still quick. So I expect a lot of really, really good things in our ability to pressure, both for us to be able to rotate if we have to play a lot of snaps because our offense is going fast and either we score quickly, hopefully, or even if we don't, we're going to have more snaps during the season than what we did in years past. And so when we think back to the Frost years the first time, do I think we're going to see the same offense where we're going, go? Probably not. It'll probably be a little bit slower, but I wouldn't be surprised to get 90 to 110 snaps in some games, which means if you've got guys that are not conditioned, especially on the defense, or they're out there a lot, then you're going to need to be able to rotate them. And I feel pretty solid about all of those guys. And Jamal Johnson too. So between Jamal Johnson, Malachi Lawrence, Isaiah Nixon, man, I can't talk tonight, Nigel Kelly, and Sincere Edwards, I think all of those guys are going to play a role for us. And whether it's just for rotational guys, I think Nigel Kelly will probably get the starting role. Malachi Lawrence will probably be on the other edge, but I wouldn't be surprised if Sincere Edwards starts challenging for some playing time pretty quickly.
Oh, Sincere Edwards could potentially start right away. I mean, I don't think he'll just be challenging for playing time. I think he'll be probably the second guy in after, whether it's Lawrence or Kelly after them, after they go sit. So I think he'll be a very, very pivotal piece. Probably you're right. Probably not the starter after I think Lawrence and Kelly do have that locked up, but I think he'll, definitely be someone that's going to get a lot of playing time. And then, one other interesting one I forgot to mention, it was a late transfer at the very end of the second window that opens up in the spring, was the guy from Michigan. Now, this is, I don't know if I pronouncing his name correctly, but Yermik Kumba. What's interesting about him, he played at Michigan. He was the #1 prospect in the country of France, which, all right, big deal, right? But he was a 3-star prospect by all the major outlets. He was covered by all the major outlets, so not a random, European player like Paul Rubel originally or someone like that, right? This is a guy that had offers from multiple bigger programs and obviously committed to Michigan. Never really got the playing time at Michigan. I mean, he was part of that national championship roster. And obviously didn't really see any playing time, but it's an interesting prospect. He's also an edge rusher. I don't know if we're going to see him play or it's more of a kind of a developmental project. But look what we saw with Paul Rubelt. He didn't play initially either, and then now look at him. He's a key starter on the offensive line 4 or 5 years later. So
I think he's on his 6th year and 115th bratwurst.
What was that? Yeah,
so
that's true. And
but going back to what you're saying about Kumba, right? So we recruited him as well when he was coming out, and he is known as a freak athlete. He's 6'5", 260 pounds. So he's the largest defensive end edge rusher that we have, both by, Nigel Kelly is still 6'5", but he's 250 pounds. So he's built. So this is a guy who amazed everybody when he was being recruited, known as a physical specimen. And if he has another season where he either gets some playing time or gets learn some more technique, he was kind of, when you're playing in France, you don't get the same level of football as what you get here. But if he can learn the technique, I think he could be a force maybe again in that rotation, which would mean you've got 6 guys who at any time can rotate in on that defensive line as well. But I think he's going to be a later season or later in the season kind of guy if he starts to get some playing time, other than, the quote unquote, and I hate to call them cupcakes. I don't call anybody a cupcake anymore after the 2015 season. But outside of the cupcakes, I think he'll get some playing time. All the guys will there. But at the end of the day, I think ultimately, towards the end of the season, he'll see some snaps. And just a quick side note, thank you, UCF, for putting the spellings, listening to the spellings back onto the roster. That was something Josh has been asking for forever. And so now they have the, they record their names so you can hear how it's supposed to be said. All right, go ahead. Sorry, Alan.
Yeah, no worries. So that really sums up defensive ends. We're all excited about it. A lot of returning talent. And then we just talked about, obviously, Sincere Edwards, big time transfer. So then we move over to defensive tackle. There definitely was more attrition at defensive tackle, but obviously we also retained a lot of key guys there. Just kind of quickly talking about the exiting guys, none bigger than Lee Hunter, obviously. This is a guy, he was one of 2 players that made either the first or second team last year. Obviously, him and RJ Harvey were the only 2 all Big 12 players last year. Obviously, Lee had a monster year, kind of like we all expected. I remember us talking at this time last year saying Lee Hunter will not be back, not because he'll be a transfer, but because he will be an NFL draft pick. When Texas Tech comes and throws a massive bag at you that you could probably make more than on your rookie contract, don't blame him for going to Texas Tech. So ultimately, he ends up transferring to a conference rival in Texas Tech. So that was a big loss. On top of that, we did lose Matthew Alexander to the portal, who was more of a reserve guy, a guy that ended up having a couple solid years. His sophomore and junior year ended up kind of getting into the mix there. He was in the same class as Malachi Lawrence, but not a huge loss. And then we also lost Marcus Downs to the portal, who didn't see a ton of playing time last year. But on the flip side, we were able to retain John Walker, which is obviously the biggest news. I think there was a lot of speculation about him potentially transferring because he ultimately missed the entire year with a lower leg injury and had to redshirt the season. So there's a lot of speculation. Was he going to go, the DG route where you just, you redshirt the year and then you leave? Ultimately, he stayed. And that is big because we all have kind of been talking about him since the moment he signed, when he chose us over the Florida Gators, that this could be a potential All-American prospect for us. And he showed signs of brilliance his freshman year when he wasn't a starter, but he played a lot. And then he had that unfortunate injury about 3 to 4 weeks prior to season, about this time last year. But he's back. He's healthy. He's fully expected to be a starter and kind of get back on track there. And also there's
we would have had, it would have been interesting to see what he and Lee Hunter could have done last year, because we were expecting big things from that duo, right? It never seems like when we have, 2 solid stars like that, that somebody ends up getting hurt, right? But you're right. He's going to be a big deal. And he has come out, and the UCF produced a video for him where he talked about his injury and how he was hobbled. Even, he was coming back towards the middle of the season end of the season last year, but he was still hobbled, and he's fully back. And John says he's fully back, healthy. So I'm excited to see what he's going to do. 6'4", 324 pounds. Do you remember our defensive lines in the first Frost era? They weren't 6'4". They're not 324
Maybe
pounds.
Tristan Hill, and that's about it.
Yeah, that's about it.
Yeah. So, exciting, very, very exciting to have him back. I also say we did lose Ricky Barber and Dalen Dotson, who were starters last year, obviously to graduation, not to the portal. And Ricky Barber actually ended up signing an NFL, preseason deal as an undrafted free agent. Don't know if he's still on a team, but, so we did, like I said, have some attrition at defensive tackle. However, we do obviously, like I said, have John Walker returning. And then there's a couple other returning guys from last year that played sparingly. You had Tyreek Robinson, who was actually a walk-on who ended up earning a scholarship and ended up playing the first few games. He was a kind of a freak. He was 6'2", 320 pounds as a high school senior. Now he's 6'2", 340 pounds. He's a redshirt freshman, ended up redshirting, but played like the first 3 or 4 games and actually started, which it was I remember when the first depth chart got released last year, we all saw his name and we're like, where's this guy coming from? Ended up not playing the rest of the year, but he's an interesting prospect. Then you have Andrew Rumpf coming back, who also redshirted. And then you have Derek LeBlanc, who, when we got him from Oklahoma, we were all excited about him. Again, did not really crack the rotation. I don't see those 3 guys, again, being too much of factors right now, even though they are interesting. The defensive tackles is where we ended up getting most of our transfers on the line. So we ended up bringing in 4 defensive tackle transfers. The first one being RJ Jackson. He was actually the very first transfer to commit to the 2025 transfer cycle for UCF. A guy out of Tulsa who's played a lot of significant games. He's a guy that's already expected to start, played in all 12 games last year, had 3 sacks, 25 tackles, and pretty much has played every game he's been at Tulsa, which was his freshman and sophomore year. So he comes in as a junior. He's a guy that will probably start 6'3", 310 pounds. Then right after that, we landed Horace Lockett from Georgia Tech, who this is someone we're really excited about. And UCF's a little familiar with him because he played against UCF in their last bowl game when he was at Georgia Tech. This guy is 6'6", 355 pounds. He's had big dude. Yeah, huge guy. He plays nose tackle. He's a guy that's played in, 20, I think it was like 24 games overall at Georgia Tech. So he comes in, should definitely get some playing time at tackle, whether it's behind John Walker or maybe it's behind RJ Jackson, but someone that I think most UCF fans should be excited about. Then we had 2 other later transfers in the spring cycle. One is Jefferson LaFontaine. He played at Bethune-Cookman, so comes in from an FCS school, but he played at North Miami Beach High, a school I'm very familiar with, had a really strong high school career there. They have a very strong program, 6'3", 295 pounds. He played a lot at Bethune-Cookman, but again, sometimes those defensive tackle prospects don't necessarily transfer, over to the FBS level, but we will see. We've had some success with tackles coming over from the lower ranks. And then finally, we had Rodney Laura, who comes over from UNC. This is a guy that's dealt with injuries for a big part of his career. He ended up, not playing at all as a freshman, then ended up redshirting again in his, I guess, second year at North Carolina, played in just 4 games, hasn't really seen a ton of action, but 6'3", 300 pounds, he could be in the mix. But if I had to guess, I would say at this point, it looks like to me, John Walker and RJ Jackson Jr. are going to be the top 2 guys at tackle. But again, I think we have depth there. We have a big line. Everyone on the line is over 6 foot and over 310 pounds. I mean, 310 is the smallest guy that we have. So we have some beef there and we have some depth, maybe a little bit less than last year. If you think, obviously Lee Hunter and Matthew Alexander and some of the guys that we had there. So maybe a little bit less depth. But when you talk about John Walker returning and some of these transfers we got, I feel really good about the tackles as well.
Yeah, Horace Lockett and RJ Jackson Jr., you should know those names. I think Rodney Laura will play a factor, but Rodney Laura won't play a factor this year. I think he's a redshirt sophomore. To your point, he was injured. So I don't think he's going to be as much of a factor. However, Horace Lockett and RJ Jackson Jr., both juniors, which is good, which means they'll have this season and next season with us. Horace Lockett was very, very, very highly touted coming out of high school. He also did very well at Georgia Tech. That was a big loss for them, someone they didn't want to lose,
Right.
and someone that was very, very disruptive. And I think he was all ACC as well when he was with the Jackets. So to me, I think Horace Lockett's going to be someone who's going to move bodies. RJ Jackson Jr., also similar kind of guy. Granted, it's in the AAC at Tulsa. Tulsa, for some reason, has a tendency to put out good linemen. I guess it's that Midwest Oklahoma kind of thing. But he also had a lot of accolades as well and was very, very disruptive for Tulsa. So those two transfers, I think, granted, we talked about some of the other guys, John Walker, but I think those two guys are going to be are going to be factors for us this year and can move offensive lines. And they both came in the spring. They both were turning heads in the spring, and they both were mentioned numerous times during interviews, and folks that were there watching both behind the scenes as shareholders or as folks that were there for the scrimmages in the spring. Both Tyreek Robinson and Horace Lockett will be factors this year.
Yeah, 100% agree. They're going to be big factors. So I think it's very safe to say that defensive line as a whole is the best, by far the best position group on defense, has the best combination of returning proven assets. We talk about Kelly and Walker, and then the most exciting, I think, transfers coming in that are also fairly proven at their previous schools, Power 5 guys for the most part. So I feel good about that. Then I will kind of talk about, there was supposed to be 2 freshman signees when it comes to defensive tackle in the 2025 class. The one that we were all really excited about was Ryshawn Perry. Unfortunately, he signed his letter of intent, but never made it onto campus, and it does not look like he's listed on the roster. So I'm not quite sure what happened there. He's not going to be on UCF's 2025 roster, but he was an exciting guy. 3-star, had offers from Auburn, a couple other SEC schools, multiple Big Ten schools. Miami was a top-rated recruit in Covington, Georgia. Unfortunately, he won't be on the roster. The other one was a very, very late signing, actually on the day of National Signing Day, was Trenton Turner. He's a non-ranked recruit. I don't know if he's considered as a walk-on. He had 0 FBS offers other than UCF, but he's 6'2", 280 pounds. So again, maybe a developmental project. It doesn't really say if he's a walk-on or not, but he literally signed on signing day. So it's kind of a last-second Frost move, who obviously only had a few weeks to get prepared after he ended up returning to UCF. So Trenton Turner is on the roster. Don't see him as a guy that's going to be playing, but he comes out of Lakeland. So semi-local guy, Central Florida, and maybe a prospect for the future. But, again, I think we should all feel pretty good about this defensive line.
Yeah. What would you, we kind of talked about it last week. I think this is our strongest by far. Defensive line is our strongest position group as a whole. So, I expect us to be able to pressure the quarterback all season long between the ends, and we've got depth there. We mentioned 5 or 6 names there, plus who we've got in the middle. I think that this defensive line is obviously going to be a strength, but I think it's the strongest unit on the team. Defensive backs probably the second strongest. Well, actually, I take that back. Running backs, we haven't talked about yet. I think that would be 1 and 2, or 1A and 1B as far as the strongest position groups on the team. But as far as everybody else goes, defensive line is by far going to be the strength of this team this upcoming season. How would you grade this defensive line against other defensive lines that we've had in the past? Is it the best defensive line we've had?
I don't think it's the best. I would put it, if I'm thinking, let's go recent, from let's just say from 2013, UCF's first like really premier season to about now, I would probably consider this top 3 or top 4. To me, a couple other lines that probably stick out a little bit more. That 2017 line with Tristan Hill, Jemias Pittman, Tony Garrod. I mean, that to me is probably number 1 or number 2. There were just a bunch of studs on that. Then when you think about 2013, there was a lot of really big names on that defensive line as well. So I would probably put it in the top. And it wasn't healthy last year, but last year's, if fully healthy, could have been one of the best ones too. When you talk about Lee Hunter, if John Walker would have been healthy, Malachi Lawrence, a lot of those guys. So Nigella Kelly. So I would probably say it rivals last year's because John Walker is back, and probably somewhere in the top 3 after 2017 and 2013. I mean, 2017. Tony Garrod signed an undrafted free agent deal. Tristan Hill got drafted in the second round. Jemias Pittman played on the Dolphins for 2 or 3 years. I mean, that line had some dogs. So tough to say. I mean, I think maybe when we look back at the end of the year, maybe that we're speaking a different tune. Maybe it ends up being, a top 2, maybe number 1. But I think a little bit for now remains to be seen. We have to see how some of these transfers perform. We have to see how John Walker holds up after, being a year out. But I do, like I said, I still think it's one of the better ones for sure.
Yeah, I think Lockett's going to be a big factor for us this year. I know we're talking about John Walker. I know we're talking about Sincere Edwards. I know we're talking about those guys, but I think Lockett's going to be a huge factor for us. That Georgia Tech defense last year was really, really, really good, and he was a key piece of that defensive line. So I expect big things from the defensive line. I expect big things from Lockett, and I do think this is the best unit on the team. So we started with a bang. Let's go ahead and swivot it to a position group that is not the top position group on the team, but still one we should talk about in tight ends. We had a big loss there last year.
Yes.
So let's go ahead and talk about the tight ends.
Yeah, tight ends, I think, is a group for UCF that hasn't had a lot of stability since we had, probably 17, 18, when we had Jordan Akins and Michael Kulubiale and, some guys there that were really actually pass-catching tight ends. Since then, we've seen a lot of blocking tight ends. Until last year, Randy Pittman by far was probably the 3rd best player on offense last year after RJ Harvey and Kobe Hudson. This is a guy that what we all expected. He broke out, I think most Knight fans agreed that he got underutilized. He could have probably had a much bigger year. A little bit, obviously, when RJ Harvey eating up a lot of the offense and we played a very ground heavy game, but Pittman was underutilized and he was a stud. There's no surprise that he was one of the top, we'll call it free agents with, the way college football is now. He's one of the top free agents in college football, and obviously ended up signing with Florida State, not just because Gus is there. I'm pretty sure they would have been happy to get him regardless if Gus was there or not. So losing Randy Pittman hurts. He was 3rd on the team in receptions, yards, and touchdowns. But that being said, I don't think the tight end position, I actually would argue that the tight end position right now is probably one of the best it's been in quite some time, maybe since 2017. I think it starts with 2 guys, Kylan Fox and Dylan Wade. Kylan Fox, I think we all look at least I do, as the Randy Pittman replacement. He was extremely highly recruited. He came in the class right after Pittman, so it was like back-to-back wins at tight end, a high 3-star guy, 6'4", 230 pounds.
Well, it depends on where you look. He was 4-star too in certain.
Okay, so yeah, so he was a highly recruited guy, 4-star, like you said. Last year, they could have, redshirted him. They didn't. He played in 11 games last year. Was he mostly on special teams? Absolutely. He only caught three passes for 22 yards, but you could tell this guy is more than just a blocker, more than just a special teams guy. He looks like he could be very special. He was ranked actually 12th nationally out of all tight ends coming out of high school. So yeah, you're right. He was a 4-star guy actually by 247 Rivals and ESPN. So I'm sorry that I did say 3-star, but he was a 4-star. So he was a really big get for UCF's 2024 class. And I don't see why he can't turn into our next tight end star as soon as this year. The main competition, for reps and for catches at the tight end spot is going to be Dylan Wade, who comes in from Maryland, who had a strong year at Maryland last year, was, I would say, a bigger part of their offense. Caught a few touchdown passes, I think was top 3 on the team in catches and receptions and yards. So this Dylan Wade definitely has the experience, played in the Big Ten. I think was a fairly strong get at transfer, and they needed one. They needed to get one other, big tight end that could catch the ball, and that was what Dylan Wade ended up being. So when you talk about Dylan Wade and Kylan Fox as your top 2, I feel very good about it. Would I feel better if we had Randy Pittman? Of course I would, but I definitely like these 2 as our 2, potentially main, catching tight ends. And I think the last time we saw the tight end actually get utilized was under Coach Frost, like I said, with, Kulubiale and Akins. And I know I'm missing one. And Jordan Franks. I mean, we had some, that's 2 guys that made it to the NFL right there, and Franks and Akins. So they played really well in Coach Frost's offense. So you have Wade and Fox to start. You have one other returning guy, Thomas Wadsworth, who was initially a walk-on. They had him at halfback, and then now I think he's moved over to tight end. I don't know if he's earned a scholarship yet, but I don't know how much he'll be a factor. Maybe some blocking. Then they also brought in another transfer, Max Drag, out of App State. I don't know. Again,
hold on. Let's stop there. I mean, is that not the best football name ever? Max Drag?
Max Drag. It's like the perfect football name.
Come on. It's like the drag route. That's the first thing that I think of is the drag route, right? So
that or Colton Boomer. What's the better football name?
Oh,
that's tough because Boomer's great for a kicker.
Yeah, 100%. But Max Drag, I mean, come on. You can't get any better than that for a tight end.
No, you can't.
All right, so keep going.
Yeah, so you have Drag coming in with a great name out of App State. Played over there at App State. Obviously, with our new offensive line coach coming from App State, not a surprise that we got a couple App State guys to transfer over. So I think he may be a factor probably as a blocker. I know in the one of the recent scrimmages they had, he actually had him as the first team tight end, but I know Wade and Fox actually sat out that. So really not much to glean from that. Other than that, they did also bring in one tight end in the 2025 class in Caden Pining, who was our lone recruit out of Ohio, actually out of Cincinnati, had an offer from Cincy and a couple other P4 schools. So again, the freshman tight end recently, we haven't seen a lot of freshmen play other than Kylan Fox, and we've had quite a few over the last few years that really just never did much. You think of someone like Grant Stevens, who unfortunately had to medically retire. So that is someone we lose from last year's squad. And, other freshmen that we've signed at tight end just have never really amounted to anything. But Caden Pining looks like a solid prospect. And then the interesting, I will say real quickly, we did lose 3 other than Randy Pittman. We obviously lost Reese Adkins, Evan Morris, and Jordan Davis all to graduation. Who again, those were more Reese and Evan were more blocking guys. And Jordan
Davis, that guy, he got injured every season.
Every year, he had 2 ACL tears back to back. Unfortunately.
Yeah, Gabe Davis's brother, right? And he was all about UCF, and it's just a sad ending. I feel bad for him. He handled it well, like
he did, and he stayed the whole time. He could have transferred.
Yeah, I think he's going to get into coaching. So like Jordan, that's a guy that got handed a bad lot in life in his football career, but made lemons out of lemonade for sure.
He did. You're right. And, I think we'll always have a special place in our hearts for him just because he is obviously Gabe Davis's brother, which I think is always cool when you have, a legendary UCF player's little brother play there. We've seen that with, Cam Moore, who's obviously Bam Moore's little brother, who's still, on the team now. So it's kind of cool when you see these little brothers come in. And unfortunately, I mean, Davis wasn't, he chose UCF, but he had his options. He wasn't just, we weren't his only offer. So he could have played. Looked like he had a lot of promise, but he just could not stay healthy and could not stay on the field. So like you said, I think he'll probably get into coaching, maybe be a grad assistant or something for UCF. So that, and obviously what definitely has the connection to Frost just through Gabe there. So, this coaching change doesn't really impact him and his standing with UCF. So we'll see what happens with Jordan. But yeah, the other interesting thing is, and there's 2 players like this, but what's more interesting to us is, you guys know the name Debo Coleman because he was on UCF's basketball roster last year. Well, he transferred to UCF's football team. Interesting enough, he played some football in high school, but obviously ended up being a top basketball recruit, so went the basketball route. But he has 1 year of eligibility left for football, and he chose to play for UCF. UCF is putting him at tight end. I don't know what to expect out of that. I don't know if this is just kind of a cool, funny story. But he obviously has, high school football background. So this is not some guy that's just starting to play football now, but obviously for the first time at the college level. We'll see. Frost is obviously the one that made that decision. This wasn't, a Gus thing or before Frost got here. So Frost must see something in Debo Coleman. I'm kind of excited about that. I don't think I've ever seen a UCF basketball player become a UCF football player. We've seen some other
baseball.
We have seen baseball very recently with JRP. And I do remember just like back in 2007 or 8, we had a UF basketball player that I think ended up playing UCF football. And then there's one other transfer right now. I'm drawing a blank on what position he is, but he also played basketball last year at some other school. And now he's on our football team. But Debo should be interesting. Do you think he'll play, or I don't know what to expect here?
I'll be honest with you. I mean, I also was interested in this, right? So before we started the podcast, I looked up his high school stats on Max Preps because I wanted to see what position he played, because I was a little surprised that he went in a tight end. And here's where it would be an advantage for him at tight end. He's got to have some hops, right? So being able to stretch and get some passes if he can catch, right, on some passing routes, I think that he could be dangerous, because literally you just have to throw when you're getting close to the end zone, if you put him in the corner and just throw a 50-50 ball at him, just throw a high arcing ball, he should be able to grab and snag those out of the air. So he may be one of those guys that's for short yardage or, within the 20-yard line, someone who comes in because you don't need a whole lot of technique. You just do an out route and, end up by the pylon in the back of the end zone and then use your vertical leap. He's got good height on him. When he was in high school, which was interesting, he played his freshman and sophomore years on varsity. He has stats for passing, rushing, all-purpose yards, total yards, and he has defensive stats as well. So he played on offense, defense. He played a little bit of special teams. He had one punt return for 10 yards.
He did it all, huh?
Yeah, he literally did it all. He had one touchdown. But defensively, he actually did pretty well. His freshman year, he had 38 solo tackles, sophomore year, 29, 66 total tackles his freshman year, 48 his second, 6.6 tackles per game, 4.8 his sophomore year. So he had 3 fumble recoveries. He had a half an interception. I don't know how you get a half interception, maybe a tipped ball or something like that. Yeah. And 11 passes defended. So on defense, he was a pretty good player. And then you flip over to offense, and he was 10 for 22, 154 yards, and averaged 15.4 yards passing, 2 TDs passing. Then on rushing, he averaged 7 yards per carry, right? 14.7 yards per game. So he didn't get very many, but had 7 yards per carry. And then all-purpose yards, he had 231 total yards. So it's interesting to me because I looked at this and I'm like, okay, Debo Coleman, he hasn't played since his sophomore year, right? So how can we utilize him? He's obviously athletic. He's got good size for a tight end. I see him. He's either going to be an all blocking tight end or someone that we drop in within the 20s and just say, hey, do an out route to the pylon and let's throw the ball up at the pylon and you can leap. Your vert's going to be higher than anybody else, any defender that's on you. So we're going to have you leap and get that ball at the pylon. That's really where I would see him as a threat. I don't think this is a guy that's going to be, one, he hasn't played since his sophomore year in high school. 2, college is a little bit different. 3, he is a college athlete, though. So I think I see him as one of those guys that if you're inside the 20s, I'd send him to the pylon, throw a 50-50 ball, and let him go and grab it out of the sky where nobody else can touch it. So that's kind of what I see his role as, or maybe a special teams guy. I don't know. You tell me.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you there. Yeah, maybe just a red zone threat and or a special teams guy. It's kind of unprecedented. I would be curious to know. That could be a sometimes funny fact of the week or whatever, where I find out how many former college basketball players have switched to college football in the last 10 years. I just haven't seen too many situations like this. And I know there's a ton, especially when you talk about high school, a ton of dual sport athletes that whether it's basketball and football or football and track or, football and baseball, that's not uncommon, but it's fairly uncommon, I think, to be playing 2 sports at the next level in college or, to have played or to be on the team's basketball roster and then the next year to be on the football roster. So I don't know. I mean, like you said, he has the size. He obviously has a lot of experience from high school and was clearly someone that was an impact player that, did a lot of things on the field on both sides of the ball. But I don't know. It's hard for me to envision him just kind of stepping in and getting reps over Kylan Fox and Dylan Wade, for example. So maybe, just a guy, maybe there's some trick plays there. Maybe there's some, you have him line up looking like a blocker. Then he, goes out for a route and catches something, a couple yards out from the end zone or just more of a special teams guy. So, but I am interested to see how he ends up playing.
Yeah, the only other one that I could see that's somewhat similar of a story is when Jordan Akins, who was a professional Major League Baseball player in the Rangers organization, he was playing in the minor, or he wasn't a major league player. He was playing in the minors, but then he came back to UCF. He was originally recruited to UCF for football, decided to play baseball, got drafted in baseball, and then came back and played football for UCF football. So outside of that, I don't know of any other basketball players that have ever done, because guys like that, their conditioning is completely different. They aren't built, and their conditioning isn't built for muscle mass. So I like I said, I think for me, that's a guy you use in the red zone. And if his vert is what I think it is, with his height, and he was playing as a point guard, I would expect him to, maybe be used in those kinds of situations at the back of the pylon, or slip him out somewhere where people aren't expecting it. That's to use advantage of his height and his vert. That's kind of what I'm expecting.
Yeah, that's fair.
All right. So before we leave this topic and move on to the QBs, let's talk a little bit about who do you expect to start for D-line? Who's your expected starting line for D-line and tight ends? And what's your overall grade for both?
Yeah, I think, we mentioned it briefly, but, at defensive end, I do see Malachi Lawrence and Ajala Kelly being the 2 guys at the end there. And then at tackle, I know John Walker has one of those spots locked up. I'm leaning towards RJ Jackson Jr. as the other tackle, but again, like we kind of, I'm getting the vibe that it's going to be RJ Jackson, but I would not be surprised to see Lockett, eventually take that spot. And you also think defensive line is such a constant rotation. I mean, we've unfortunately had in the last couple of years where there hasn't been depth, where you saw guys that literally were playing every single rep. I remember our now fired defensive coordinator talking about that last year, where it was kind of unprecedented, where there was certain guys that literally were playing every single rep every game due to injury / lack of depth. But that's not something that's common. I think there's going to be rotation. So if Jackson gets to start, doesn't mean Horace Lockett's not going to be playing heavy minutes, but I don't know. That's just my prediction right now. And I give the defensive line an A-, probably the best grade on the team. I think there could be a little bit more depth at the tackle position. I feel really good about the edge rushers, and I feel really good about the tackles. I just think there could be a little bit more depth there when you talk about, I don't really know how, if you lose someone like Lee Hunter, it's hard for me to say that, there's not going to be a little bit of, not maybe not regression, but just, it's hard to rank it as good without a Lee Hunter. But John Walker coming back is obviously a big, replacement, if you will, for him. Then a tight end, I generally every year when I'm doing my preseason rankings of the position groups, I don't think I've ever given tight end higher than a B minus, except for, when we had Akins and Koulibaly. So I'd probably say I feel good about a B minus again this year, because I do feel really good about Dylan Wade and Kylan Fox, especially Fox. I almost think Pittman transferring was one of the best things that could happen for him. I think this would have been a guy that probably would have transferred out.
Pittman would have definitely continued to start, right? So
yeah.
I do think that they would have had more opportunities under under Frost than they would have under Gus Malzahn. We underutilized the tight end position severely. So I think not only is it good for Fox, but I think he's going to get more opportunities than Pittman did. As you said, he was underutilized last season. So I think he does have the opportunity. He is going to be the presumed starter. He is going to have his opportunities to make a difference, and he will be thrown the ball. So I expect him to have a big season as far as tight ends are concerned. And, shout out to Brandy, his mom, because she's been a big supporter and very vocal supporter of UCF in the true 2017 mom squad fashion. So yeah, big things from him. I think for me overall, I would almost go with the B, but I kind of agree with you with the B minus, because there's too much. To me, there's been too much variability in that particular position group. Those guys are going to take a minute to kind of catch up. So I agree with your B minus there.
Yeah. All right, good stuff. So overall,
who's going to be the pass catching starter and who's going to be the blocking starter?
It's tough. Wade obviously has more experience and more experience under his belt and the more proven production. And I guess I always, not to say that a coach won't always play the best player, but except for if you're Gus Malzahn, but that's a different story. But obviously Frost brought in Wade, whereas Kylan Fox was kind of just already here. I'm thinking Wade kind of starts out the season as the pass catcher, but I feel like Kylan Fox ultimately surpasses him. And I don't know that Wade is a blocking type tight end just with his frame. I would think that'd be someone more like Max Drag, for example, that would be the blocking tight end. So I want to say that it's going to start out to be Wade as the guy. I mean, you talk about a guy that just has a lot more experience. He's a redshirt junior and has been in college football for 4 years compared to Fox going into his second season. So, but I do think Fox ultimately ends up cutting into his role by the end of the season.
Awesome. All right. Well, let's go ahead and swiv it yet again.
Swiv it again.
All right. And we're going to talk about the QBs again. We touched on them last week. We talked about Jacurri Brown, and I think I might need to eat some crow this week. So I'm gonna say that, some humble pie. So we had a plethora of different interviews this week talking about the quarterbacks, whether it was KZ, whether it was Scott Frost, whether it was the quarterbacks themselves that had interviews this week. And the vibe that I'm getting, and shout out to Brandon Helwig, because he brings lots of good information and inside information. When Scott Frost says it's a 3-horse race, it really is a 3-horse race. So unless he's sandbagging, which I doubt, for Taven Jackson, it looks like Jacurri and Fancher are the two leading candidates right now for QB1. Cam Fancher, between KZ and Scott Frost, both of them had said all three of our quarterbacks are mobile. All three of them are have the ability to start and run the offense and can throw the ball. Cam Fancher's big. He's the FAU transfer. Cam Fancher's big advantage with all of this is he knows the inside of the offense inside and out. So from what I understand, he's done a lot of work in the film room, and he knows the offense. He knows where to go with the ball. He's consistent, or the most consistent player on the field when it comes to understanding where he needs to go with the ball, either pre-snap, reads, or post. And he doesn't have the strongest arm of the three. Both Jacurri and Taven have stronger arms. However, he's consistently accurate, consistent with the ball, and has the ability to use his feet if he needs to. So right now, just because he knows the offense so well, he's kind of given the slight nod. Now, Jacurri, which here's where that humble pie comes in. I said last week or the week before that if Jacurri was the starter, that wouldn't look good for us for this season. Both KZ and Scott have come out, and some folks behind the scenes. One of the biggest problems we've had with Jacurri has been he's got a cannon of an arm, right? He's very super athletic. He's got a large frame, so when he runs, he's hard to bring down. His problem has been the command of the offense and his consistency with throwing the ball. KZ and Scottfrost have been working very, very hard with Jacurri Brown in trying to make his passing game more consistent. And from what folks that have been attending practices that are donors and other people have saying, he's made a ton of strides in his ability to consistently connect with the passing game, which if he can put that together and does what he needs to do between the ears, he can live up to the billing of who he was supposed to be. Remember, he was a 4-star quarterback. He was supposed to be the starter at Miami, didn't end up starting there, lost that job to a 5-star that was coming in, transferred to us. Last year showed a lot of really good athleticism, but again, between the ears and consistency. And here's where I had another problem with Gus Malzahn's regime is they did not do a great job with that. Now you've got 2 national champion, I'm going to claim it, but some people don't, quarterbacks that are working with you. You've got Scottfrost and you've got KZ, who, when it comes to different arm angles, when it comes to being able to where to go with the ball when, being able to do the pre-snap reads, those 2 are about the best people you could have for that. Scottfrost for the running game, because when he was playing for Nebraska, that was a Tom Osborne offense that used a lot of wing type concepts. And then you have KZ, who was more and more proficient at those arm angles and making sure you're consistently getting a good release, making sure you're going to the right place, and he could read the offenses really well. So I think those 2 really made Jacurri, and from what they've said, have really focused with Jacurri on those 2 aspects of his game. And so it really is a 1A, 1B. Now, Taven Jackson, who I've been a supporter of, what I'm reading in between the lines, Taven Jackson had an interview this past week where he said, I've got a chip on my shoulder because I've played quarterback and I've gotten beat out, or played backup multiple times. In high school, he was a big time prospect. The thing that I'm hearing, though, is that, and KZ even said this, is his confidence and his ability to pull the trigger and just step up and say, hey, I'm going to own this offense and we're going to march down the field and we're going to get this win, is not as strong as the 2 others. So I think he's got all of the measurables. He was super highly recruited. He's paid, he's from an NIL perspective, he's paid the highest of all of the quarterbacks. And I think that the big thing that he's going to need to do is show that he wants the position and that he's going to be the guy in the 4th quarter, like KZ did so many times, who's just going to say, we're going to score on this drive and I'm going to make it happen. So he's, again, very athletic, has the ability to be mobile, has a strong arm, but does he have the will to win? And Thursday is really the opportunity, because both KZ and Scottfrost have said nobody has really stood out consistently. They've all stood out at times from the other, but nobody has stood out consistently. However, Cam Fancher is the most consistent when it comes to where the ball needs to be placed, getting it there, when it needs to be, doing the pre-snap reads, understanding the offense. And at least at the beginning of the season, that might be to his advantage. So it'll be really, really interesting. But scrimmage on Thursday will be the first big step. So we should start to see more of who is going to lead this team after Thursday. And again, there's always coach speak. There's the question of, if you have no starting quarterback, or if you have 3 starting potential quarterbacks, you have no starting quarterback. But I truly think that if Jacurri has made the strides that people are talking about, and he can do that on a consistent basis, he may finally get to that superstar status that he had the physical attributes to be. And I think that Coach Malzahn and his staff failed him last year. We talked about why that was. And I think if he really digs in, and it seems like everybody's saying this QB room is supportive of each other and has that type of culture, I think that he could actually maybe break out this year and live up to his potential. So what do you think about that, Alan? Do you have any other thoughts you want to add?
Yeah, I mean, the QB race is something that's, I mean, it feels like we've had QB races the last, gosh, since Dillon Gabriel left, it feels like. I mean, I know JRP was kind of locked in that second season that he was here, but other than that, it's kind of been, let me
ask you this. Do you really think there was? Because I don't think there was. I think Gus Malzahn chooses his quarterback, whoever it is, and that's who he's going to run with. I mean, look how long KJ was in there, especially after he was brought in. We paid him a lot of money for UCF NIL. And right. Gus Malzahn, saw the same performance as we did. And he was out of shape, overweight. And other than TCU, really didn't live up to his billing from a quarterback perspective. And he rode that horse for a long, long time. JRP and Mikey Keene, no matter who was the better quarterback in the offseason, JRP is the starting quarterback. I don't see, and the way he recruited, I don't see Gus Malzahn. I don't think we've ever really had a quarterback competition when it came to that. I think he had his quarterbacks, and that was it. Scottfrost, on the other hand, has been very, very specific, and I believe him, that he'll play the best player. So, what do you think about that? I didn't mean to hijack your point, but
no, I agree. I agree. I think you're right that the quarterback race was only a name only. I guess I'm more speaking from the uncertainty perspective. It's felt like since Gus got here, other than his first year when we knew DG was the starter, there's been a lot of just uncertainty, whether it was, is Mikey Keene going to keep the job? Then when JRP got hurt, you got Mikey Keene in, and he played a really good couple of games, and you're like, all right, is he going to keep up with Mikey Keene? And then it's like, oh no, JRP's back in. But then you saw a couple of games like the Navy game where he took out JRP in the middle of the game and put in Mikey Keene. So there's just been that uncertainty. And then last year, obviously, we started 4 different quarterbacks. So there was a ton of uncertainty. Maybe going into the season, you're right, it was already locked in, even though there was a quote unquote race. But just in season, there's just been so much uncertainty. So I'd really like to have, barring injury, I'd like to have a stable QB that's, plays all 12, 13, 14 games, whatever it is. And I agree with you. I think, to me, the biggest surprise has been Fancher. I purely, and maybe this just was a judgment of seeing a former FAU/Marshall quarterback come in. I thought, hey, this is completely a depth play. That's it. But by all accounts, Fancher has been in the thick of the race. And he was
good at FAU. He turned heads at FAU, and they won a lot of games with Fancher at the helm. So I agree, but I also agree with you. I think that was a depth play when they brought him in.
Yeah, it turned into something more. But let's be honest, Cam Fancher by far has the most starting experience of any quarterback on this roster. Jacurri Brown has started a total of like 6 games. Obviously, Taven Jackson is a total of like less than 6. He started 2 last year and then maybe 4 the year before. So there's by far Fancher is going to probably be the most polished, experienced guy. But yeah, Jacurri Brown, I think another one we thought, this guy was done. Obviously you talk about bringing in Cam Fancher, you bring in Taven Jackson, the presumed, favorite when we first transferred, a Frost guy. Jacurri Brown, he's this lame duck quarterback, the only guy returning from last year's roster at quarterback that had any playing time, but he's in the thick of it. It really does feel like a three-man race right now, and I don't know which way it's leaning. I mean, like you said, Jacurri Brown has made strides. We know what he could do with his legs. We know he's a dynamic rusher, had 401 rushing yards and 4 TDs on the ground last year. We saw him extend a lot of plays with his feet, but he was inconsistent with his arm, and it wasn't reliable at all. If he takes a step forward with his arm, there's a reason he was a 4-star prospect that had offers from Miami, Florida State, Florida.
And he's had the arm. He just hasn't had the consistency. And the other piece that he was missing too was knowing the offense. I'm sorry, but Gus Malzahn, I'm giving myself a thumbs up now. Thank you, Apple. Gus Malzahn failed Jacurri Brown. He absolutely failed him. Like, didn't have the people around him that he needed to be able to show him the way when it came to film study and everything else. Trey Neal talked about it last week when it came to film study. Film study is different. You can't when you're in a Power 4 program. I'm going to say Power 5 or Power 4 because Power 5 doesn't exist and soon to be Power 3. You have to be able to read defenses. You have to have the mental game as well as the physical attributes. You're not going to out-athlete anybody. 4-star, 5-star ratings are because of athletic prowess coming out of high school. But you still have to learn how to play the game. Look at KZ, one of the best quarterbacks ever to don a UCF uniform. The reason he was so good was, yes, he was nimble, but he was only, 5'10"? I stood beside him in cleats, and he was about my height, right? I'm 5'10" and a half, 5'11", right around there. He was about my height. He was 180-some pounds. Dylan Gabriel wasn't huge. He was like 5'10", 5'11". Now, he filled out after Oklahoma, but he wasn't a big guy either. The quarterbacks, he has the physical attributes. He has a big arm. He has the ability to run. He's hard to bring down. He does well in the RPO game, but he didn't have it between the ears, and he didn't have a consistent pass. If he can be consistent 75% of the time, he could be consistent with his arm, Jacurri Brown could win a lot of football games in a UCF uniform.
Yeah, no, there's no doubt about it. I mean, I'm always a guy that likes, I know Jacurri's a transfer. I always kind of like the guy that's been at UCF. When it comes to quarterback specifically, I don't really care about as much other positions, but I always prefer homegrown guys, which we don't have any on the roster at all. They all transferred. But Jacurri's the next closest thing to that. Obviously, I want whoever's quarterback to be the best man for the job. It doesn't matter if they're transfer or not, but I do think, Jacurri being here for a year, like you said, now, learning the offense a little bit more, having all the physical traits, having the speed that we saw obviously Mackenzie Milton have the ability to do with his legs. We're used to fast quarterbacks over here at UCF. So Jacurri has that. Can he get consistency with his arm? Then I think he should be the favorite. I just don't know. I mean, we haven't seen anything. That UCF doesn't release a ton of tape of him, maybe his best pass in practice or something here and there.
But we do hear things. We do hear things.
Yeah.
We hear things from practice that are not official, right? So folks that spend a lot more money on UCF football than I can afford right now. Hopefully that will change. But, those folks that are spending that kind of money and are showing up at practice are saying those things too. So it's not just what KZ's saying. It's not just what Frost is saying. It's also people that are at the practices and are seeing these guys. And I think that the litmus test, again, they're running 7-on-7s, 11-on-11s. That's what they're basically running in practice right now. Until you get these guys in live action, which you'll see them in scrimmages and starting to see that and seeing who separates themselves, that will be the difference. And we haven't even talked about Taven Jackson yet. Taven Jackson is athletically gifted as well. He's got the right size. The vibe that I'm getting is that he doesn't have the confidence to lead this team. And part of that is because he has transferred multiple times. The other part about that is that there is a statistic out there, believe it or not, that quarterbacks that transfer one time are 3 times as successful as quarterbacks that transfer multiple times.
That makes sense.
So I do think it benefits Jacurri to be there, but I think the big difference for Jacurri Brown, if he takes advantage of it and if he can live up to his billing, is the fact that he's got KZ. I think KZ will make a huge difference when it comes to the mechanics of throwing a football, arm angles, knowing what foot to plant. Some of the throws last year from Jacurri Brown, when you look at his mechanics, he was throwing off the wrong foot. He was not planting his feet. He was running around a lot, which was great, but he was playing backyard football. And when it comes to consistency and accuracy, it has everything to do with your ability to have the right mechanics, plant your foot, get your shoulders in the right place, and make that decision, the right way. So I'm going to I was wondering why Alan was so quiet and he wasn't blinking, but as it turns out, he actually dropped. So I'm going to drop fake Alan or zombie Alan and bring in real Alan. Alan, welcome back to the stage. We dropped zombie Alan off of the stage.
No, so I heard what you're saying. Yeah, I agree. I think there's a great case for Jacurri Brown to be a starter. We haven't really talked about Taven Jackson that much, but it's tough. I mean, you have the experience of Fancher. You have the all-around athletic ability of Jacurri Brown, who's maybe missing one piece here of getting that consistency. And then you have Taven Jackson, who definitely showed flashes. He was the presumed starter at Indiana, ultimately ended up losing the job. But then when their quarterback got injured last year, he had two really strong starts for Indiana where he showed some flashes too. So I feel this is truly as up in the air as any QB race prior to, forget Malzahn's fake races, at any race that we've had that we can recall. Huh?
I love it. Fake races. I love it.
Yeah. Any, whether it was the O'Leary era or, whatever the case may be, this to me feels very up in the air, and I don't know who the favorite is. I have a little bit of a gut feel that it feels like it's Taven Jackson, just because that was the first guy he brought in. It felt like it was a Frost guy, and it just, everyone likes to go with their guy. I mean, it's just like when he got to Nebraska, he brought in Adrian Martinez, and before long, Adrian Martinez was a starter. I know it's a little different. He was a 4-star prospect, right? He got right out of high school compared to Jackson, who's a 4-star, but a transfer. So I don't know. I just have a gut feel that it feels like he wants to go with Jackson, but he's not there yet where you can name it. So I honestly, I don't even think I can feel good about
Jackson hasn't taken the reins.
He hasn't. No, he hasn't. He hasn't taken the reins.
He hasn't taken the bull by the horns. He hasn't shown the confidence, right? So Taven Jackson, believe it or not, in his last 5 games, he's won every single one of them, including beating Washington, beating Purdue, which actually 66-0, which is interesting, and Nebraska. So it's
that's why Frost likes him. He beat Nebraska.
Yeah, that's 100% why. But his stats, when you look at his stats, they've gotten,
they're not flashy, but
they
hasn't played a lot, so
they aren't flashy, but they're good. So like last year, he was 23 of 37, 62.2% completion percentage, had 349 yards, averaged 9.4 yards per attempt. So that's actually pretty good. If anywhere between 9 and 10 yards, you're pretty successful. 4 TDs, 1 interception, 69 long, 171.7 rating. The year before, in 2023, he was 78 of 128, so 60.9. So he's a fairly consistent quarterback. 914 yards, 7.1 yards per attempt, 2 TDs and 5 interceptions, 41 long. That was the big break on or knock on him, was his TD to interception ratio. But last year, he clearly took a step forward. The question is going to be, can Taven Jackson take the bull by the horns, show the confidence that he's going to lead this offense? And I truly think that there's a little bit of, how should I say this? There's a little bit, when you've been the backup or passed over multiple times, I think that confidence just isn't there as much as it should be. And so I'd like to see if Taven Jackson can build that confidence and show. I think he would be at 6'4", 212 pounds. He would be the starting quarterback for the UCF Knights. He's had it out of high school. He was a 4-star, I think, out of high school. He's got the measurables. He's got an arm. It's just a question of, is he going to have enough playing time? Now, that goes back to what you were saying before about the snaps and the number of snaps that these quarterbacks have, Jacurri and Taven Jackson, when it's live, right? Both of those quarterbacks haven't played, don't have a lot of snaps under their belt in playing college football games, whereas Cam Fancher does. So the question there is how much is that going to hurt them, right? In being able to be the starter at UCF. And I think that's the biggest question. The good news for both of them is there's not a lot of high expectations this year. So if they show some promise when it comes to their physical attributes or their ability to move the ball, I think they're going to get some run. Whoever it is, whoever stands out most is going to get some run when it comes to being the starter for UCF football. So this is going to be an ongoing conversation. I am worried about whoever the starter is going to be is having enough snaps with the ones, right? I know they're rotating snaps right now, but you need that repetition. So I am worried about that, but I think that it seems to be that we may have 3 quarterbacks that actually can start for UCF football. I think Cam Fancher would be more of a game manager. I think the other 2 could be more of star power and be the difference in winning games.
Yeah, no, it's a very interesting race. I think it's a tad concerning that no one has about 3.5 weeks before the season, that no one's really stepped up to really take away that position. I don't think, regardless of who it is, I do not think we're going to see super high level dynamic quarterback play this year. I think there's the chance you see the game manager, which to a degree that can lead to some success. We saw it with Mikey Keene, granted in a lower tier conference, but there is, something about that can work.
Hey, he beat Florida. That's all I'm going to say.
He did beat Florida. I think if we are going to see true dynamic star power at quarterback, something like we haven't seen since DG or KZ, I think it's going to be with Jacurri Brown. That is a guy. I mean, we already know how electric he is with his feet, and we saw him. What he did against Iowa State. He was running in all. I mean, what he run for like almost 200 yards that game. He's the only quarterback on the roster that can do that. There's not a doubt in my mind. If he can pair that with a halfway, consistent arm, not arm talent that is there, but just the consistency of hitting his receivers in stride and making good reads, we could have a dynamic star quarterback on our hands this year. If that doesn't happen, I think we're going to maybe have an average or slightly above average player at quarterback, which could be okay when you compare it to last year when we didn't know who was starting game in and game out for the most part, and 4 different starters is usually not a recipe for success. So I think it can't be worse than last year. Right, it wasn't. It can't be worse than last year, but I don't think this year, and maybe not until next year or the following year when Frost gets a true, exciting freshman QB out of the high school ranks, are we going to potentially get to what we've seen at a lot of points in the last decade or so? But that doesn't mean it can't happen this year. I'm just leaning towards, when you talk about the season being this month, and there's still really not a bona fide starter that's pulled away, to me, that there's going to be concerns about that regardless, and whether he's slow playing it, whatever the case may be. If there was a guy that was locked in and looked significantly better than his 2 competitors,
he'd be starting. There wouldn't be any question. Yeah, there wouldn't be any question.
Right. So that's where it's at. But hopefully we just get competent, consistent play from a guy that plays and starts all 12 games, where there's not controversy and we're not calling for his head 3 games and 4 games. And then the next guy comes and has 1 good game and they're like, oh, he's awesome. Then he sucks the next game. All right, let's bring in the next guy. I just want some sort of consistency at the position would be nice, especially when you talk about, we know we can do it on the ground with our running backs, and we don't know a lot about our receivers yet, but we have talent there. Huh?
All of them are mobile. All of them are mobile. So you can do it with the quarterbacks too, right? So I agree. It'll be really, really interesting to see what happens after this first scrimmage, because I think you have to name the starting quarterback by the second scrimmage.
You have to.
I think you have to. So we'll see what that language looks like after Thursday. And that'll tell us a lot about who our quarterback for the season is going to be. So, yeah, I agree with you. And that's why we're going to continue talking about this as we lead into the season, right? Because quarterback is the most important player on the field. And it is concerning at this more for me, whether whoever that's going to be ends up getting the most number of snaps to be able to run the offense. However, they're going to get 2 cupcake games to kind of figure it out too. All right, let's go ahead and swivot and talk a little bit about Antoine Jackson. So Antoine Jackson, we mentioned the DBs, right? We talked about them last week. Antoine Jackson, remember the guy, bless you, who was a 4-star coming out of high school, ended up going to East Carolina to follow his girlfriend. Came from East Carolina, transferred to UCF, and was a very, very good player. We were expecting a lot out of him last year. He got hurt, so injured, and that seemed to be a theme last year for our players, and has come back this season and has really started to show out. So when we're talking about defensive backs and we're talking about folks that can stand out, he kind of got lost in the noise for a while because of his injury, and that tends to happen when you get injured and you don't hear from him. But Antoine Jackson is standing out on the field and is one of the guys that's getting the most buzz when you ask questions of the players, when you ask the team, when you ask the people that donate a lot of money to the shareholder society and show up at practice. Antoine Jackson is a name that's consistently coming up, and he's a ball hawk. The thing about it is as we talk about this stuff, one of the focuses for this defense is going to be turnovers, back to what we saw first time in the Frost era. So instead of playing the hands, these guys are going to be playing the ball. And Antoine Jackson has a history and was known for, interceptions. So I expect a lot of big things. It was kind of a surprise that it's kind of come back, that Antoine Jackson's name's been floating. And quite frankly, a lot of us forgot about him because this time last season, Antoine Jackson was a big name that we were talking about. It seems like he's come back fully healthy and he's coming back into his own. So I'm really excited to see what happens with Antoine Jackson. Anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, agreed. I mean, when it was a surprise that he signed to ECU, but like you said, he had a girlfriend there. This is a 4-star prospect that had an offer from every school in the country, essentially. And when we got him from ECU, we were like, oh, this is a big deal. I don't think he had a bad year last year. He just kind of had an up and down year to a degree.
He was injured most of the season. Like he played it.
Yeah, he had some injuries, obviously, but yeah, I mean, he wasn't what we were expecting. But like you said, first of all, if you haven't gone to UCF's Instagram page recently, they showed a one-handed interception grab that he made in practice the other day. Was just spectacular. Obviously,
on one of what I expect to be one of our starting wide receivers in black.
Correct. So I think, everyone's practice tape looks well to a degree that gets put out, publicly, but
mine did.
Mine
did.
Well, yeah, it's who's going to put out bad tape of themselves, right? So I think that but either way, I think we should be excited about Antoine Jackson. I think he could take a huge leap this year. And yeah, I think there's a lot to be excited about when it comes to him. So I'm excited to see what he can do. And I think he could definitely be one of the starting corners for us.
Yeah. So you have a couple of other notes on here about Paul Rubelt being named to the Werfel Trophy watch list. Interesting. And defensive Nigel Kelly being named to PFF's all Big 12 preseason team. So kind of going back to that defensive line that we were talking about. That's some pretty high praise and sets expectations for us. Do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, there's not much to add other than, I think it's a really cool story when you talk about a guy that I don't think anyone really expected much when it was kind of kind of a head turner. Like when we first recruited, we was like, oh, this guy from Germany, where did that come from? Josh Heupel recruit. Funny to say that he's still here. When he's been here since Josh Heupel was a coach. So, been here in the program for a long time, and he stayed through 3 coaching staffs now. He's going to be one of the few Knights, and I think really one of the few players across college football that started his career and ended his career in the same college, which is, I think, a cool story in itself, regardless of where you're from or what position or whatever. But the fact that he's really worked from this guy that we saw as a raw prospect. I mean, 6'11", 350-pound guys don't grow on trees. So him, that alone was always pretty crazy. What was that?
I said, that's a lot of schnitzel.
That is a lot of schnitzel. So, to see him, I think, develop really from where he was day one, where he was nowhere near even the 2 deep by any stretch of the imagination.
He didn't even speak English when he started here.
Right.
They had to learn German to teach him technique.
Right. I mean, the fact that he stayed through all that, I mean, he probably was a guy that probably had home Poland because he was in this weird country. He doesn't know anyone in Orlando, all this stuff. And for him to stay and now turn into, our only returning starting offensive lineman, probably our best offensive lineman on paper, and a guy that's now up, getting preseason award watch list is a hell of a story. And, not much to add to it. It's cool. And I think he should have his best year yet.
All right. So, Alan, I will remind you, we are a clean show for the kids.
Heck, I said heck.
No, yeah. I heard that. All right. So outside of that, the next thing I kind of want to talk about is we have hired a GM. So a general manager of UCF football. We've talked about this before. Scottfrost has hired Trent Mossbrucker as the UCF football general manager. Interesting thing is, different schools are using this in different ways. In the era of NIL and roster management and all of that, GMs have kind of become commonplace amongst power conferences. And Trent Mossbrucker, believe it or not, was actually with UCF football in the past. He also followed Scottfrost to Nebraska. And he's really been a long time administrator. He was with us in the 2017 timeframe. He was with Purdue for a while. He was with Louisville for a while as well. So he in recruiting positions. So he's an AD now for football operations is at Nebraska, and now he's going to become the GM. So what does a GM do at UCF football? Well, as you remember, Jeff Love came in, and he was kind of the guy that wanted the GM position, didn't get the GM position, but came in and managed the NIL support, brought in 69 different players, which is crazy. I mean, 69 new players to a roster, negotiated all of that, and really did a lot of the heavy lifting. So what is the GM going to do? Well, they're going to oversee roster construction and contract negotiation. So some of those with the era of rev share, this is going to become less Wild West. And I'll say this, I met with a coach while I was up here in Santa Rosa Beach. They were here for their meetings a few years ago when NIL was really starting to pop off. And we ended up having cigars together, and then we had dinner together. The whole time we were sitting there, he was getting calls constantly from people's moms, players, everything, like the quote unquote uncles or agents or whatever, constantly fielding calls and negotiating. And this wasn't at a Power 4 school, right? This was at a G5 school, and constantly, like every 5 to 10 minutes, he was picking up a call. That's what this was. What a GM will do is bring professional roster management to UCF football. So Scottfrost isn't fielding calls from people trying to negotiate on the fly, bringing someone in. So he will lead the negotiation and roster management. So he's going to be the guy, like you see in the NFL, that's going to have the whiteboard, that's going to be negotiating. and trying to do that. He's going to be dealing. We are going to have a cap strategy. So now with the new rules that are surrounding how much you can spend on rev share, there's a cap strategy that's going to be employed. And it's not just one time like the NFL where you have a draft season and a trade deadline. You've essentially got two trade deadlines in the same season. So they're going to be doing that. He'll also oversee the player personnel department. So, he's going to be looking over all the recruiting, all of the evaluation, all of the quote unquote talent scouts that are looking at this, and going to be the guy who's negotiating all of these contracts with student athletes, families, and quote unquote agents now. So he's going to be taking care of not just, and they're breaking it down not just by the team level. So when we're talking about a salary cap structure, there's going to be a salary cap for the individual, for a position group, and team level. So you're going to have a pool of money. If you're thinking about the ins and outs of how this is going to be broken down, you're going to have a pool of money for the linebackers, a pool of money for the quarterbacks, a pool of money for the wide receivers, etc. That comes out of that team rev share program. And he's going to have to break that down and negotiate all of that. So Frost will be consulted when it comes to this stuff. But I think one of the biggest learnings that Frost had coming in to UCF and having not had to deal with this before is that you need someone to do that for you. We're applying science towards this rev share. There's going to be valuations that are based on how much are we going to pay for not just a particular position or a particular team, but how much are we going to pay for an individual player? So he's going to be the guy that's going to be evaluating all of that. He's going to be the guy that's going to be managing the cap. He's the guy that's going to make sure that he's negotiating the contracts that go on this. So this is a new day. This is NFL light when it comes to contract negotiations. And this is what the GM's going to be doing. And I'm glad we have one. I don't know much about Trent as in his ability to fulfill this role, but Frost trusts him. He's been at Louisville. He's been at other Power 4 programs. And at Nebraska. And if you can deal with money at Nebraska with all the politics that are involved there, you've learned quite a bit. So welcome, Trent Mossbrucker, GM of UCF Football. And then lastly, I wanted to touch on Javon Baker. So Javon Baker went to the Patriots. That room is filled with talent. And so there was a lot of noise as to whether Javon Baker would actually stay with the Patriots. And it seems like he's got the most number of touchdowns in camps with 11. So he looks like he may actually stay, despite all of the crazy things that you've heard about in the news. Sounds like his talent is actually beginning to shine there with the Pats. So good luck to Javon Baker. Let's go ahead and swim it with a little bit of UCF baseball news in the offseason. When we're talking about baseball, we're talking about Knights in the NFL or in the MLB. Yeah, not the NFL. Alex Freeman, congrats to Alex Freeman. He made the show. He made his debut with the Dodgers, and he had his first career RBI with the Dodgers. So another Knight that has made it in the MLB and got his first career RBI. So next, let's go ahead and swim it one more time and talk a little bit of listener love. This is where we thank you for participating, for liking, for subscribing, for commenting with us, for participating during the show, and for basically supporting the program. So first of all, thank you, Ryan Roy. Great, his comment, great discussion earlier. We had 5 new subs this week. Unfortunately, only one I can shout out because the other 4, of course, have hidden their names. So welcome Jacob Randazzo to the family. And then for Twitter, Megan Bridgewater. So mom to hometown hero Jordan Bridgewater is a UCF wide receiver, 3-star wide receiver who we picked up recently. Thank you for the follow. And shout out to the UCF Mom Squad at CB44 and at the Heel Brothers podcast. So apparently UNC is interested in us, and we'll probably have a conversation before the game. All right. Let's go ahead, and I'll just remind you, please tell your friends. We do it for you. We don't make any money off of this. We do it because we enjoy it and because you enjoy it. So make sure you're liking, subscribing, telling your friends, and let's go ahead and swiv it to Alan's Oxymoronic stat of the week. Alan, take it away.
Yeah, so not a really long one, but just a pretty simple one. But obviously in today's world of college football, full of transfers, so always like to look at kind of like that stat I just talked about, Paul Rubel, going to be probably one of the few UCF players that started his career and ended his career. So right now, when you look at the total roster, there's 52 total transfers on the roster, whether they're transfers from this season or a guy like, for example, Nigella Kelly, who transferred in 2 seasons ago. Anyways, the roster is made up with 52 total transfers, and the rest would obviously be, people that started their careers at UCF and are still here, or walk-ons, or obviously true freshmen. So of the 52 total transfers, and this is a kind of encouraging, 30 of the 52 are former Power 5 or Power 4 players. So they played at a previous Power 4 or Power 5 school. Then what I found interesting, you would think the next highest number would be Group of 5, but you'd be wrong. There's 15 former FCS or D2 players on this roster, and then the final 8 are Group of 5. So obviously largely dominated by former Power 4 guys, but 15 previous FCS or D2 players, and some of them even from the same schools as well. When you talk about 2 guys from Limestone, 2 guys from Brown, so some interesting people from kind of all over the college ranks, and just about half are from when you talk about transfers from the state of Florida, which you think that would have been a little bit higher, most of the guys that come back home, but there's guys from all over the country on this roster when you talk about former transfers. So that is my stat of the week.
Yeah, that's interesting. I wouldn't expect more from D2 and FCS than G5, but that's definitely an interesting stat. Okay. As always, we normally follow this up with Josh's sometimes funny fact of the week. But as he is last and least this week because he is off on vacation, and we'll be back, I think, next week to the show, we won't have one. However, I do have a quick update on other UCF sports that Alan does not watch.
I know.
So yeah, you really don't, because last week we didn't have anything in here. So so number one, let's go with men's soccer. They have their first exhibition game at home versus Stetson at 6:15 p.m. on August 9th. And number two, UCF women's soccer played Jacksonville University on the 3rd in an exhibition. They did not publish the score. So unless you show, you're not going to be able to see what the score was. Next up, we are at Miami August 8th at 2:30 p.m. Also, congrats to the team for earning the United Soccer Coaches Team Academic Award. And that will take us through this episode. Next week, we'll start breaking down the offense. So we kind of started with tight ends this week, but we'll do a deeper dive into wide receivers, running backs, and, the QB situation as it continues to develop. And then we have the O-line to talk about as well, because there's a lot of variability there as well. As you said, Paul Rubel, we had for a long time, but there's a lot of new faces in the offensive line, and that's, you win games in the trenches. So we've got a great defensive line. It'll be interesting to see how we're doing on the O-line. In addition to that, we march towards our 100th episode, so we'll have some special folks that'll join us for that. So thank you, everyone, for following along. We do it for you. Tell your friends. Thank you very, very, very much. We enjoy doing it with you. Go Knights and
charge on.
Charge on, baby. All right. I get to randomly babble like Josh does at the end of the
So we've
show.
known to fill that.